All right, John, thanks for coming into the boot room today. So, all of us, we are obviously in our houses, but it doesn't mean that we can't get some type of workout in. Obviously, we're not being able to work out on the pitch with other players now, but we're still able to do different types, whether that's with weights, individual work with the ball, or by ourselves with distance running, those different types of things. And I think something that's really key that our players and just anyone who comes to the boot room and wants to know about what type of service you provide, and then the collaboration that Queen City Mutiny and Performance Unlimited can provide, specifically pertaining to recovery. So
Yeah.
let's say it's a player, it's an individual that comes in and or you put them through an exercise, or we just finished training. What would the initial recovery look like when it comes specifically to the physical side of that individual?
Love it. So I appreciate you having me first and foremost. And I think of recovery as in kind of these boxes that I want to check along the way from the very end of my training session and or game. And really, we think about training as just being kind of a summary, a smaller snapshot of a larger recovery when we're thinking game or multiple games on a weekend. So right off the bat, the first thing I want to do when I'm stepping away from training or a game is I want to think about hydration. How can I immediately get into a state that's going to bring me back into what we call homeostasis? That's just a fancy term to say getting our bodies back to neutral or recovered state. And, no matter, the temperature of the day or how hard the training session was, the first thing and the thing that's going to be most effective to being able to bring me back down to neutral is my hydration level. That's just going to really dictate, how quickly I'm going to recover, how well or the quality of the recovery, for me to be able to reproduce some sort of intensity, later on that day or, the next day, hopefully, if we're in a weekend training or a weekend game scenario. So right off the bat, as soon as I'm done training, I want to get technically about 150% of the water that I lost during that session or during that game. Now, it's not realistic for us to be able to do what we would do in a professional or a collegiate setting, even where we weigh in before the training session or the game, and then we weigh out afterwards to get an understanding of how much water or how much fluids we're actually losing by pounds. But a good idea is to really start reproducing the ability for us to sip water at specific intervals. So if I'm thinking about, yes, technically I have to reproduce the certain amount of fluids that I lost during that training session, a better rule of thumb is just to say at every 5 to 10 minutes, I'm just taking 1 to 2 mouthfuls of water. And if I'm doing that consistently for the remainder of the day, the remainder of the evening, I'm going to get back in what I actually lost through that training session or through that game. So that's number one from a hydration standpoint. Now, a lot of people would ask, well, what about Gatorade? What about electrolytes? What about all the additives and extracurricular stuff that comes along with the conversation of hydration? I think we even talked about it previously. Number one, if you're not in what would be termed high heat, and we do definitely have that here in Charlotte, but high heat for us would be 90 degrees or plus weather. If you're not training or playing beyond a 60-minute standpoint, you're not going to probably need the electrolyte additives or supplements inside of a drink, like your Gatorades, Powerades, and things of that nature. A lot of people these days are taking the electrolyte mixes, the tabs. Those are great when you're meeting those characteristics that I just talked about. When you're meeting high heat, when you're meeting long duration, and or either one of those, then you can start taking those things in within an hour after your training is done or your game is done. So are they necessary? No. Are they advised when you have those characteristics, one or both of those going on, heat or duration? Absolutely.
Okay.
Hey, look, there's a lot more going on with that. We can get into a lot of depth here. So, beyond the immediate hydration standpoint, the next thing, number two, is what am I eating? Where am I actually going to get, again, going back into that rule of thumb, how can I get myself back into neutral, back into that rested state? And it's really about replenishing not just the fluids, but replenishing the calories, the nutrients, the vitamins and minerals, the things that are going to allow me to be able to repair what was damaged in that intensity of our training or our game, but B, be able to bring my energy level back up so that I have the reserve so that I can go repeat that again and produce a high performing result. So, when we talk about, where we're going to get those calories, or we talk about the quality of those calories, we mentioned last time, the rules of thumb for eating are going to be how close to the ground can you create your food sources, so vegetables, fish over beef, things of that nature, and that are going to really allow us to create the bulk of the vitamins and minerals and the calories that are going to get us back to that neutral state. So we want to start that process within. A lot of people thought about a long time ago, not that long ago, but it was a little bit of a controversy whether or not it should be done within 30 minutes. A meal should be in with for 45 minutes, within an hour. The long story short of the research is showing that it's not really that important on a timing perspective unless you have multiple games or multiple training sessions within a day. If you're just training once a day, just playing once a day, getting it in within 1 to 2 hours is perfectly fine. Just let your natural processes allow you to create that hunger and start getting those calories back in and maintaining the focus on the quality of the calories. Now, a little bit of a tip, a little bit of kind of the behind the scenes advantage, things that I would recommend when I was consulting with the professionals, with the collegiate athletes, is something that is shown in research to be very, very beneficial, which is tart cherry juice. One of those things that's going to really get you back to neutral quickly. It's going to really bring literally the acidic state of your body that comes along with a very high intensity or a long duration of work, and bring that back into where your body is recovering quickly and effectively. Drinking just an ounce of tart cherry juice. I have my brands that I really like out there. Mixing that with about 6 to 8 ounces of water and having that as a part of your fluid replenishment, that does some wonders for you. Beyond that, after your meals, then we start talking about how we're prepping for our resting state. We're thinking about, do we have cold baths? Controversies there as well, right? A lot of people talk about the benefit from a psychological standpoint, the benefit being better and deeper sleep. A lot of people even go into the research and showing that there really is no muscular or intramuscular repair that's different from just resting without ice. But there's a psychological component to that. And if anybody's done an ice bath, as yeah, probably you and I have done many of them, but as horrible as they are, as annoying as they can be, there is a psychological benefit to them that's shown that you feel better after them, that your body does have this emotional or state of replenishment that honestly, and you and I think would agree on this, that if psychologically it works, then it works, right? So, so if you're a cold bath person, a cold shower person, go for it. Yes, there are some, kind of some guided advice and temperature of the water, how long you stay in, how much of your body is actually going in. But those are the details that maybe in the nuances that maybe we could talk about if you want to. But really, if you're a cold bath, cold shower person, I would do that right after, you start getting into the processes of getting yourself back and down into the sleep kind of routine. So after your cold bath, I want to start thinking about, where am I from a sleep standpoint? Am I going to be able to get myself, especially at the ages with a mutiny, am I going to be able to get myself that 9-10 hours of sleep? Not necessarily trying to pull back and create the minimum of 8 hours. Kids in the development stages and the biological ages that we're still in a lot of maturation and growth, we need that 10 hours. So how do we start to reverse engineer my wake up time to where I've got to get myself into bed and start creating that sleep hygiene, around that 10-hour mark? Something else, another little tip in there, another little advantage that we do with from a consulting standpoint is compression. A lot of people talk about these days compression pants, compression tights, and how that could benefit the overall recovery. So being able to go on the internet. Now, compression tights for recovery are not the same thing as compression tights like sliders that we would wear underneath our shorts.
Right.
Okay. So these are really specifically designed with the amount of tension that they're creating on specific parts of the body, the calves primarily, the hamstrings and glutes primarily, and being able to make sure and ensure that that blood flow and lymph flow is getting back to the heart as effectively as possible, since we don't have a natural pump system at the bottom of our feet to get that blood returning back into the heart there.
What
So
if someone
compression is
doesn't
good.
have compression shorts and able to get it? Is there a way to replicate that? Maybe legs, elevated legs or something like that to replicate it without the shorts?
Great point. Yes, there is. There are, number one, doing the legs elevated against the wall is a great way to increase that blood flow. Manual massage, foam rolling is a great way to increase that blood flow. A lot of us, there's a ton of different massage implements out there. And, when it comes to, let's talk about foam rolling for a second. When it comes to that process, we really want to make sure that we are understanding why we're doing the foam rolling so that we're not inducing damage. Because I think that anything overdone or anything taken to the extreme can really push us into a perspective that we're doing more harm than good on the long term. So a lot of conversations go out, into technique or duration of foam rolling. But the one I want to focus on is really mostly what type of foam roller we're actually using. So if we think about a foam roller itself, think literally foam roller. So I know the internet has really brought us into this perspective of no pain, no gain, where we're using like baseballs, lacrosse balls, PVC pipes, and concrete pipes out there. People are getting into some weird and crazy stuff, but those things are really pushing the envelope and treading this water of detriment versus benefit. And all we're looking for here is to increase blood flow, like we just talked about with compression. So when we're doing foam rolling, I want to stick to a foam roller, something a little bit pliable, something a little bit softer. And we want to stick to these long flowing, light type of movements, not these hard digging in, highly compressive type of movements. Those are more technical, and I can't say that that's not ever good for you. But as a body worker or massage therapist myself, and somebody who does a ton of manual therapy on athletes, young and old, you really have to be skilled in order to do these high compressive, deep compressive type of work. So in foam rolling for athletes, we want to keep it long and fluid, light and quick, to where we're increasing blood flow so that we're inducing that recovery as quick as possible.
Does that change per muscle or per body area? Say your calf versus your hamstring. Would a hamstring, would you look to try to serrate more as you foam roll versus your calf, or vice versa?
Yeah, it's a great point. And when you talk about that very intelligent word of serrating, we're thinking about angles of the actual muscle itself, or the angle that the joint is actually attaching, and where that line of action, how that line of that muscle is really going up into the body. So if I was going to think about my calf, yes, I would think about, being able to spend more time at different angles in things like the calf and the hamstrings, because we do have more of a diagonal type of muscle degree or angle of those muscles, joint angles, when we're actually going up the chain there. So yes, we can do a little bit of side to side action. We can do a little bit of diagonal action, not just straight forward and back like we kind of routinely think about. So good point.
And that would go. So I'm clear, because it's ones that we could have used. Is like with your calf, you can turn in almost 3 different angles with your toe straight up,
You're
your toe
exactly
out, pointed inward, and then
in
your
and out.
pointed outward.
Yes.
I make sure those are 3 that no matter what, whether or not your calf is sore or if it's just your nightly roll, which I do personally because I think it feels better, that I try to hit those 3. Just how long I spend on them is whether or not it's sore or if it's just getting the blood flow, as you said.
It's a great point. So we always tell the players, in a good rule of thumb is just 7 repetitions on the calf, toe up, toe inside, toe outside, 7 up and down, 7 up and down, 7 up and down. Same thing with the hamstring. That's going to give us, probably the duration that's going to be beneficial for us. And you hit the nail on the head, the angles that are going to really be most important, so that we're getting the full range of that muscle and not just the straight middle line action of that muscle.
So we did calf, we did hamstring. Uh,
The other important ones for me would be glutes, number one, quads, number two, and then anything that for you is an individualized piece. If I was going to foam roll, I'm going to knock out the front part of my shins, not the shin bone, but the outer edge.
yeah,
Where you get like shin splints, or you tend to get a little bit tight. That for me tends to get a little bit mucked up when I go into some intensity or long duration type of work. So I tend to try to work through those a little bit more. You can go low back if you have some tendency into getting tight in the lower back, even going into those edges a little bit. You can do upper back if you're a goalkeeper and you want to stay mobile in the shoulders, you want to stay mobile in the neck. The keys are that the only thing that you want to stay away from is bone. You really don't want to foam roll on top of bone. So rib cages, even when we look at spine, we want to look at really being able to make sure that we're staying on the soft tissue around the spine, not necessarily the spine itself.
So before I forget, I want to come back to the spine bit because I have a question about the bone that you connected. But what about your IT band and then the inside of your hamstring as well? Because those seem to be areas that maybe players of our age don't realize that they're tight until you tell them, hey, stretch here. And they're like, and you see their face all like pinched up like they ate a Sour Patch Kid.
Yeah.
Would you look to advise them to hit those on a nightly or post-match as well?
Yeah, definitely. So just like stretching, I want to say that foam rolling is not a substitution for stretching and mobility work. So a lot of times we think about foam rolling as literally being that it's just going to stretch our muscles out. And if we look at the research and we see the kind of common denominators in what it's doing for us, it's really, we're getting a lengthening of the muscle, but the lengthening of the muscle is really coming from the fact that we're increasing blood flow and we're increasing circulation that makes a secondary characteristic of a lengthened muscle. So that's number one. So if you know that, number two, being able to understand that the IT band, if you break down that literal abbreviation, is the iliotibial band, and the band is literally a connective tissue, not necessarily a connective tissue like muscle, but more so connective tissue like a tendon that we would show that would attach to our bone. So the foam rolling the IT band itself is in understanding how tender it can be is a symptom more so of above and below that band. And the IT band, just to explain, runs from the outside of our hip all the way to the outside of our knee. And really, there's two muscles that attach or are the origin of the IT band, which are our glutes and our TFL, which go into that IT band. So when you're foam rolling the IT band, you're really effectively changing those two muscles at the top that are the origin of that IT band. So what I like to say is yes, it is very important to foam roll that entire IT band. Don't spend too much time because it's tender on the band itself, but keep the blood flow going, long, smooth, light fluid motions on that band itself from the hip to the knee. Spend more time on the hip itself and spend additional time stretching the glutes and stretching the TFL. And if you don't know specific exercises for those muscles, we have it on our YouTube channel. I can certainly spend some time later on, maybe another boot room, going through some specific stretches or going through some specific foam rolls. It would actually be very beneficial for making sure that those stay pliable or supple for us.
Yeah, most definitely. It's good that the players don't have, once they see it from you, then they know what to do themselves.
Absolutely.
So touching on where you mentioned the bone and the spine. So say they're going to roll through it. Say we're saying specifically to goalkeepers, but it could be just that a player feels tight and they need to stretch their upper back. If you were to do your spine, would you actually change the angle of the foam roller so that it's perpendicular versus parallel or vice versa?
Yeah, so it depends on what we're working for. So if our spine is vertical, if I had a perpendicular foam roller, I would actually start to lean to the side a little bit so I'm getting the muscles that are aligning that spine and really staying away from the rib cage or anything that I feel like I'm compressing bone. So is it wrong and can you actually go up and down that spine? Yes and no, depending on your anatomy. Again, we don't want the majority of contact being the bone itself, especially in the spine, and how being able to create more or less curves in there can be a little bit problematic. So shift a little bit to the side, lean a little bit to the side, and get the actual meat on the sides of the actual spine. If you were to turn it vertical, where it's parallel with the spine, the foam roller itself, you can start doing some mobilizing of the different upper back and neck or shoulder portions, even some lower back work and some exercises in the core that can really start to stabilize. And if you start going side to side, you will hit some different points, a little bit more difficult and different just from a balance standpoint, but certainly doable.
So, all right, so we've touched on some foam rollers. We've led to that we'll probably end up doing some stretching in a future episode. What about the new fad of the guns for massage? What are your thoughts on them and so forth?
Yeah, so vibration foam rolling, vibration or topodemic guns. There's two big ones out there that are kind of taking the world by storm, and I think maybe the first to market and the most popular might still be the Theragun.
Yeah.
But the one that's kind of coming up along with it, and the one that we use most often at the facility with our athletes, and the one I would probably recommend out there if anybody's actually looking to go buy one, is a company called Hyperice, and it's called the Hypervolt. So the Hypervolt, the reason why we actually like the Hypervolt versus the Theragun is just comes down to the variability of speed. And again, when we talk about foam rolling, the same rules apply to the topodement. If you are not a skilled manual therapist, you want to stay light and you want to stay into low speeds with that. So they come with a lot of different attachments, these balls, these flat heads, these very sticky.
I have one that comes with like it looks like a
the fork.
And they're like, here, use this. So I'm like, I haven't I'm not nearly as diverse in this as you are, but I feel like I have a fairly good understanding of my body and how to use it. I saw that, not a chance, man. I'm gonna use the three that I know and know how to use them.
Yeah, people tend to get sadistic a little bit, in the way that they tend to recover. But especially young athletes, developing athletes, I would say this to any age, but especially the inexperienced ones that don't know their body well enough. Stay light, stay where it actually feels like it's on the muscle. Again, don't go into bone, and stay at low speeds. This is a portion where, because it's constantly moving and it's dynamic, unlike the foam roller, where I wouldn't want to take a lacrosse ball for a young athlete and hold on too long on a point to do too much compression. You can do these low speed topodements and stay at a certain point of the body. If it actually has a little bit of tenderness, you can stay on there and let that actually subside a little bit, release a little bit, and you'll probably feel that knot or that trigger point get a little bit better.
So I think you probably led to it there, but I'm going to ask specifically, when would you advise to use the gun versus rolling? Save time? Yeah. Or is it when you're specifically trying to target one minute area? Yeah.
Yes, both of those are great examples. One, time saver, so it is going to be a little bit of a hack. You can get a lot more bang for your buck with the topodement, with the actual guns. Two, you can get more specific. You can really get dialed in on micro portions of your body, micro aspects of your muscle that you can really start to target some areas. The third benefit to the gun versus the foam rollers is, because it's vibration, you have these little receptors in your muscles called proprioceptors that respond to movement itself. It's the reason why you feel tight or feel loose at specific points. It's waking up or exciting those proprioceptors in order to be able to react fast and react appropriately. A lot of times we will actually advise athletes to do the Theragun or the Hypervolt before training or before games, because you can really induce some excitement into those proprioceptors, which make you a little bit more ready. Now, on the reverse side, the same type of work can actually bring the muscles back down to recovery quicker as well, bring them back down to a more sedated, or what we call sympathetic state, so it can relax it a little bit more like a massage would.
So you see this sometimes at tournaments where we're still on it. They want the tournaments where you can have players in and out, or maybe you don't either way. I think it's regardless whether they come in and out, but they want to grab that gun right away.
Yeah.
They want to use it while the game's still going on.
Yeah.
When say they want to tag them, like, oh, my calf, and they know it's their calf. Say they know, and they've checked off a couple of the boxes that you said. They want to grab it right away. What is an appropriate time frame to use that?
Yeah, so I would say that an over reliance on any one given tool is not a good thing. So the reason why we would be grabbing the gun or the topotoment implements, instruments inside of a training or a game scenario, there has to be something out of the ordinary or on the verge of wrong with my body or a specific portion of the body. A lot of times you watch the NBA, and I think LeBron James popularized like the hypervolt, where he would use it at timeouts, and you would see him, on his thigh, really working, or his trainer on his calf, really working
Okay.
through some areas. But he's doing that because he's overloaded. The amount of work that's on him has really exacerbated fatigue and put some onset where he's on the verge where something's locking up or something just isn't right.
Mhm.
So if you want to use it as a prophylactic, a proactive ability to keep the muscles from cramping, keep the muscles from tightening up, that's okay. But don't rely on it. Don't feel like you have to use it in order
Yeah.
to perform at your best, or you have to use it at every halftime. It's not absolutely necessary. If it's a part of a small routine and it becomes habitual, especially as a young athlete, I would prefer them to know their body well enough and to do the things before and after that would not rely on
Be
a
prevent
tool
be
or instrument.
preventative, right?
Yes,
As
yes,
that's preventative to an all-out failure,
yes.
right?
Last resort,
Correct. You want to be preventative to even having to use that gun. And that's
100%.
what we're trying to do, and that's what we try to do together is make sure, hey, you don't have to use that gun. That gun
Yes,
is only if you didn't take
yes.
the necessary steps beforehand.
If you're hydrated, if you're staying mobile and doing the flexibility work that you need to in between training sessions and games, if you are eating well, if you're doing your strength training, that's keeping those muscles toned and able to take the stresses that you need to, the likelihood of you having to use that is probably very small.
Well, John, that was I think that's a lot of information for the players. I mean, we were able to tag a couple things that we did at the beginning in terms of nutrition and hydration. We were able to speak about some rolling aspects. We tagged the fact that we will lead to another episode specifically showing stretches. We spoke about the
Mhm.
guns. Before we close this episode, is there anything else that you really think is key for these players that they need to know when it comes to this subject of recovery?
Yeah, that really utilizing things like foam rolling and flexibility as a recovery tool. If you can learn that and put that into your arsenal and make that your habit, it doesn't, it's not like you have to go through a full hour worth of yoga after every training session or game. I'm talking 5 minutes. We do this after all of our IDPs when we talk about, being able to hold some big rock muscle groups for 1 minute, at the end of that training session. The same rules apply. The more you do it, the more effective it's going to be when your body gets back to it, and it's going to pump that blood. It's going to pump that lymph back into where it needs to get the junk out, to get the new blood and nutrients in, the hydration in, so that you're getting back to neutral as quickly as possible. And that's what it's all about. How can I get back to neutral as quickly as possible?
I like that. So anyone who comes and watches the show, it might even be the title, "Bring the Body Back to Neutral." I like it. Well, John, I do appreciate you coming on the boot room today. I know this is a little different setting for us. We're all at home. But again, I hope everybody's
Anytime.
staying safe where they are, still trying to get their workouts in, whether it's the same intensity or not. The number one thing I think take away from this episode is let's make sure you get the proper recovery, because you get the proper recovery hitting these three things: nutrition, hydration, and then the physical side. You'll be ready to go tomorrow. And that's what's going to keep us in tip top shape, especially in this current climate that we live in.
Habits, 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 man. It's what it's all about.
Exactly. All right. Well, I appreciate it, John. Thanks for coming on today.
Anytime, man.